I've got plans for these.
And this is what a welcome intro. What a welcome that is. Can you hold that back up now that we're live?
Gold leaf.
Amazing. I want to welcome everyone here. Thanks for joining us at noon Pacific time, 8 o'clock in the evening in Jackie's time. I'm Stephen Sparks. Along with my wife, I own Point Reyes Books in Northern California here. I see several people in the audience in the chat there who are nearby. So welcome to you and welcome to everyone else from across the world. I was just saying to Jackie, one of the benefits of doing these things is that this little bookstore an hour from San Francisco in a small town can reach a global audience with these kind of events. For me, we'll never quite replace the magic of the in-person gathering and the sort of things that can happen from that. But and the benefit is that we get to get a peek into someone like Jackie Morris's studio where he is sitting tonight.
Look at that. I feel like I should move out the way. Let me lift it up. Look at the mess in there. Crazy, crazy. And if I turn it all the way round, can you see birds at the end there?
Yes.
Can you see the bird hanging up?
Yes.
Yeah. So put you back on there. You're perched on top of a typewriter.
There are those like rate my room things on Twitter that you see where someone's background. I feel like what we could really have is rate my laptop stand, because I have 4 books under my laptop right now, holding this up on top of my dresser. That to me would be the really interesting part of seeing the setup. Everyone's sort of makeshift setup as we move into this more virtual realm of events. But anyway, all of this is to say that Jackie and I are just going to have a conversation today. We're going to talk about her art and illustration, her projects, some of the things she's reading, and sort of get how she getting through lockdown and all these things. But before we get started, I just want to mention a couple of things. Of course, we're using Crowdcast, and like any kind of technical platform like this, there are possibilities of freezing screens, audio problems, video things. So bear with us. And if it's glitchy or slow for you, you can try to refresh your page or move closer to your router, close other tabs if you have them open. If, like me, you have to close 27 tabs before you do one of these things, take the time to do that. It might help. And if for any reason, if you're not watching live or you can't see, stick around for the whole thing. This is automatically recorded and available for replay later on. One other event, we have several events, which if you subscribe to our Crowdcast channel here, you'll get updates on the latest events. One that may be of interest to some of you joining us here today is with Catherine May, who wrote a book called Wintering. I don't know if you know this, Jackie. It's sort of all about, these seasons of our life, I think, which many of us are experiencing at the moment, where kind of retreat and rest are called for, in a world in which we are increasingly pulled in many directions to do many things all the time. So Catherine will join us at noon, I believe, on December 3rd. Looking forward to that one. Right in the right time of year, and sort of help us get through this. We think a lot about, with our programming, about events that aren't just book promotion, but that are books and topics that can really serve us well, especially now. And so with that, I want to introduce Jackie Morris, who has her professional bio that is not nearly as good as her personal bio, which I snagged some things from her website. But of course, Jackie has won the Kate Greenaway Medal for The Lost Words, which I think many of us here today know well. And she's illustrated for The New Statesman, The Independent, and The Guardian. Collaborated with Ted Hughes, has written and illustrated over 40 books, including beloved classics such as The Snow Leopard, The Ice Bear, Song of the Golden Hare, Tell Me a Dragon, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and The Wild Swans. What a pedigree. And my favorite part of this is from Jackie's website, where she tells us that she lives in a small cottage in Wales held together by spiders' webs, loves wasps' nests, polar bears, and the smell of a new book, and likes to watch a good film under a blanket of cats. And making art using only colored water, and enjoys the madness of nursery rhymes. Jackie, it's a real pleasure to finally, we've been communicating now via Twitter and email for a few years at least. I mean, I think since Rob Macfarlane came out to Point Reyes, you sent me this amazing package
Yeah.
that arrived the day that Rob happened to come into town. I don't have my labyrinth stone here with me. It's in my office at the store, but among the other things in that package, it just felt, the timing felt right, obviously. And since then we've had this really nice occasional correspondence that I feel really grateful for. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. It's nice. Very nice to be here and in my own home.
You can close your laptop and you're like ready for bed, right?
Yeah. I might do a bit of colouring in before then. Actually, I'm going to go and read by the fire. But yeah, because it's dark and it's been quite stormy today. Yeah. Inside my head and outside my head. So yeah.
Well, so what's the shape of your day like these days? I mean, obviously with your work, you're, I assume, most likely working in your studio most of the time anyway. So has this, have sort of current conditions really done much to curtail? I mean, maybe emotionally, yes, but sort of like what your working day looks like.
It's been a lot different over the last few years. I like being in my studio. I like being just me and a piece of paper having a conversation, whether that is writing or painting. Although, to be honest, usually when I'm writing, I'm sat on top of the hill with, I write with a fountain pen in a notebook. And this one, my notebooks are getting more and more bizarre because they mostly, when you open them now, leaves fall out and all kinds of things. But wherever you turn, there's always leaves. So is it different? It's different in that when lockdown came, all the events that I was doing with the Spell Songs people were cancelled because all musical events were cancelled. I didn't have to travel. I could just stay home and crack on.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's been good. I'm very lucky living where I do. There's a lot of space around my house. There's a footpath that runs through my garden, and I just walk up the hill to the sea. And usually, well, I've got 3 dogs, and usually one cat comes with me at least one. And I have been known to take my teapot up the top of the hill as well, and just sit on top of the hill with tea, cats, and writing. The shape of my day, strange.
Well, it's amazing. It's sort of what I would fantasize that your life would be like, and it's turning out that is actually the case.
Yeah, we've got a standing stone up there as well, so it's got all the weird ley lines and lots of ravens.
Well, Jackie and I were talking before, and maybe we'll have a chance to a little later in the conversation to kind of talk about the books that have been helping us get through, and stones being a thing that I've at least been finding a lot of solace in, books about geology, something about the time scales, obviously, like almost incomprehensible to human imagination, that and these forces of things. But so what's it? So you're surrounded by animals. It seems like you are. Has your this kind of a deep association that I assume that you have with animals, has that been a part of your life since you were a kid?
The desire has been, but I grew up in Evesham in a little house. My dad was a policeman, didn't have many books in the house, and I was quite slow to learn to read, but I used to go to the library and usually get the Jungle Book out, actually, and just look at the pictures and then make up the stories. But I always loved animals. And when I was young, I wanted to be a bear when I grew up, or an artist. And loads of people told me that I couldn't be an artist, but nobody told me I couldn't be a bear. I don't know, that it was like being trapped in the wrong place, really. I wanted to be in the kind of place I'm in now. Or when I read The Goshawk by T.H. White, I decided that I really needed to live down a little track in a wood, in a keeper's cottage with a hawk, and that was kind of my ideal life. So I'm in a place that is quite wild, doesn't have many trees, but there's a lot of hawks around.
Yeah, you give and you take, right? I mean, it sounds like that alignment worked out well.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I like it here. I came for the weekend, walked down the high street, and realised I'd come home. It was a strange thing. I think a lot of people don't find that until much later. I think I was 32. So I went shopping and bought a house, which as an artist, I never ever thought I'd be able to do. And I'd been lucky with some work. I'd had some card designs that I'd been commissioned to do. And so it was really strange, having some money and realizing that I could take that and I could buy myself somewhere to live, or buy myself a mortgage, which is what you're doing really, isn't it? It's just strange, different kind of renting. But yeah, and that was 29 years ago now.
And so you've been in the same place since.
Yeah. I looked at one house. It was this one. And tried to play tough, but I fell in love with the place. Where it was. It wasn't the house itself. It's the cliffs. It's the birds. It's the beach with the seals on. It's the other beach where it was called White Sands, and I could never. Well, it is called White Sands. Could never work out why, because every time I went down there, the tide was in. And then one day I went down and it was a spring tide, and it was just a massive beach, really beautiful. And there's a wonderful Welsh poet called Mairead Hopwood who grew up in Strumble Head, which is very near here. And she said to me that if you listen, the stones will tell you stories. And it's just so true. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah. And you know this from our conversation, that I have this weird kind of affiliation with that part of the world. Or, I spent a lot of time at the end of last year and into early this year reading about the Scottish Islands and the Irish Islands, and and I think in some ways because I didn't grow up in California. I grew up on the East Coast, and similar to you, I think in a very working class family, and always kind of felt like I was not in the right place. And then I moved to San Francisco 14 years ago, and similarly found when we visited Point Reyes in this part of this is home. Like this is the place. There's some resonance that you can feel, and the landscapes and the wildlife sound like similar, and and so I wonder how you, because your home, I'm just looking behind you and I see things fixed to the walls, and this seems like this home has how I think a lot about Gaston Bachelard's The Poetics of Space, and how a home kind of can become the shell around the person whose home it is, and it seems to me that your home has become that, and that you work there. There's an interesting, beyond dwelling, you are actually creating and fashioning. And how is that relationship? If you didn't love the house at first, how has that relationship kind of evolved?
Oh, amazing. I mean, I think I must be like a caddis fly, I suppose. There's I've kind of put all these things everywhere around me. But I brought up 2 kids here. And, I'd always decided that if I ever bought a house, it wasn't going to be a property investment. It was a home that I wanted. So I brought up 2 children here, and they love the place. They've gone, thank goodness. One is in Germany at the moment, and one is in Goodwick, which is not that far away. So one's got a real wanderlust, and the other one is quite happy in Pembrokeshire. It's a boy one and a girl one. One of each, quite tidy. But I love listening to them talking about their growing up. And they spent one summer up a tree in hammocks reading Harry Potter. The minute they could read, this was my way of childminding. Books were my childminder for them. So once they could read, they just got books thrown at them until they left me alone.
Yeah, our poor toddler is going to have a similar experience.
Yeah. I mean, it was lovely for me that they were so interested. They were reading quite fluently by the time they were 3.
Wow.
Partly because I read so much to them when they were tiny. So I guess it's like when you're learning a language. If you hear it all the time, you pick it up. So yeah, I mean, I read quite sophisticated poetry to them when they got cross, and the rhythms of the language would settle their spirits, and it seemed to work anyway. They're both. I'm very fond of both of my children, I could say.
That's well, what? Yeah. What kind of poem? What do you have any? Maybe it's too much to remember some of the poems, because I'm curious.
It was Horace Thomas I used to read a lot, and Seamus Heaney, which one of Hannah's favourite poets now is Seamus Heaney. There's something about Horace Thomas and the spirit, just the rhythm of the language. I can't remember it now, but I always say I'm just dreadful at housework, and part of the reason is my house is just full of piles of books. So I go to tidy up and I pick up a pile of books, and inevitably there's a poetry book there, and then I start reading, and then that's it. It just never gets done.
Yeah.
So my desks are just chaotically covered in stuff. I need to clear them because I need a bit more space for my head. But there's a lot of poetry around me at the moment. I'm actually finding that I think certainly at the start of lockdown, I found poetry very readable where anything else wasn't. Concentration seemed to be difficult in that strange time at the beginning of lockdown. And that's when I discovered Matthew Francis, the Mabinogi. I was at my friend's house, my friend Nicola Davis, who's a very fine writer, and she was reading this, and I picked it up and just started reading it. And then I bought a copy in a bookshop in Chipping Norton called Jaffa Neal's, really nice bookshop, and started drawing in it. But then you sent me this one. I was really desperate to get hold of a hardback, and you couldn't get a hold of them anywhere. So yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I keep saying writing is a strong word for what I'm doing, but I'm working on a book about fog, and that collection has so much great fog in it. It wasn't the reason that I originally ordered it, but then I started reading it, and I replaced my copy. I have the paperback actually sitting on my desk here. Like you,
it's a beautiful shape, isn't it?
Yeah. There's the shape and the texture that, for me, and I know for many of us, reading a physical book is,
So listen to this. Here at the turn of the leaf, a horseman is riding through the space between one world and another, warm in his company of noises, hooves, horn squeals, hound, and man cries. Trees shed their dry brown. He's chasing a disturbance of the forest, a shiver passing from twig to twig, the whispery commotion of a deer running. As he rides on alone and his men diminish to distant shouts, his hound's song mingles with the song of a strange pack hunting towards him. Nice.
Yeah, that book, it really, he's amazing. I was just telling Jackie beforehand that I actually, beyond owning a bookstore and getting any number of books that I want for free sent to me that I also accumulate. I won't turn my laptop around so you can see my dresser that is covered in books, but I also just placed a big order from Blackwell's in the UK, and I kind of spread out my ordering. I order from the Gutter Bookshop in Dublin, which is a wonderful shop.
The name, somebody's just asked, what's the name of the yellow book again? And it is The Mabinogi by Matthew Francis. And it's a retelling of the 4 branches of the Mabinogion, which is Welsh legends. But I think you have to know the stories for it to really sit well in your brain. Do you think, or not?
I was familiar with them, but not in a deep way. I think I feel like it can kind of stand on its own in a way. Like I think there are certainly more resonances if you know because after the fact I actually went and tracked down a nice Oxford University Press edition of the original tales.
Oh, they're strange. They're really weird.
Yeah, they're really, yeah.
But I think I first encountered them in Alan Garner's The Owl Service, which was a book I only got halfway through, and then I had to take it back to the library because it terrified me.
And yeah, that book, I read that it was recently republished here, and not much of Garner's work is available in the US. And that book, ostensibly is for younger readers. And I read it and I thought, this is so strange. I mean, it's amazing and it is terrifying. But he does, yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about your work now, because we're talking about so much of your work, I think, deals with you inhabit these worlds. There's the natural world that we all know you from through the Lost Spells and the Lost Words. And if anyone hasn't seen them, I'm going to hold up. So this is the Lost Words. It takes up the whole screen. Look at this. And then
this is the French edition. Shiny, shiny.
Look at that. And then the new one, which, yeah, look at this sparkling here. Which I should say, I am here to sell books, I guess. That's sometimes I forget that that's my job. But we have more signed copies coming to the store in the next week or so. So if you place an order for one, just leave a comment in the notes, and we'll make sure you get a signed copy from both Jackie and Rob. But Jackie said there's the natural world, and then and looking at your other work, there's also like a strong affiliation with fantasy, and I sort of wonder, there are certainly overlapping parts to these, the natural world and the world of fantasy. And I wonder, like, when you're, we have to talk about this also coming to the store, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. I know several people who are on here today have expressed interest in the Unwinding, and that we just got shipping confirmation and estimates and things. So that's coming from the UK. We'll be the only bookstore in North America, I think, that has copies.
Yeah. It's very I mean, it's still in that natural space, isn't it? There's a lot of snow in my work. It's I don't know, working through dreams. I do like the book monkey. He's one of my favorite characters. He keeps popping up in different things. This is a book for taking very slowly. I don't think of it as my agent said, "Oh, I really like the poem about the fox," and I couldn't think what she was talking about. But I'd written this piece about a fox. I'm just trying to find it now. So it's very lavishly illustrated.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about what you mean by a pillow book, and and there was a great piece in Brain Pickings. If anyone hasn't seen it, maybe I can get a link and plug it into the chat. But a book that exists in this realm that is sort of, Okay, are you going to read it for us?
I'll read this bit. Yeah, this is the what she was talking about was the poem, and this all happened. So this is based on truth. In summer heat he longed for her. When leaves turned green to gold he watched for her. As winter came on feathered backs of red-winged fieldfare and threaded through the call of curlew, he waited for her. And when she came, earth under paw was iron hard. And when she came, water thickened, turned to stone. Flakes fell from a sky dark as a jackdaw's head. She stole the colour from the land, frost-feathered stone. Streams fell silent. They danced, For 3 long winter nights, they slept through the short times of light, curled in each other's company. And she gave him gifts, a lapwing wrapped in feathers beaded with frost, a bowl of bright rose hips. He gave her gifts, a crown of ice woven with berries, feathers, and the light of love in his wild fox eyes. When snowdrops speared the earth, he knew that she would be gone. The skin on the water of the pond wrinkled, warmed. Ravens turned and tumbled in courtship in the smalt blue sky. Celandine shone at the feet of hedgebanks. Wheat ears rode the ocean of air and touched the land. He woke in the dimity light of dusk to owl song and found her gone. Far away across the valley, the keen yearning song of a solitary vixen called to his blood, and the world turned. And this was opposite my house. There's a pond, used to be an irrigation pond, and it froze over, and there was one set of footprints across it, and it was a fox, but it looked as if it had danced across the frozen water. And then I found the body of a lapwing, which is a bird, and it was so cold that the kind of dewdrops on it had frozen, and it just looked beaded, and it was amazing. And then there were icicles hanging down, and they'd snagged through rose hips. So it was all there. It's just, kind of thread it all together somehow.
Yeah.
It's all true.
Wow. Well, and that's sort of what, yeah. And when I think about, I think that in some kind of simplistic way, we can think about fantasy as being, an escape from the world. But in other ways, I think in truer ways, and that it feels like a more of a deep engagement with the world, and the sort of our imaginative interactions with things, as well as like being attuned to them. And it feels to me like your work is very attuned to that natural world, while also, permitting and engaging in these kind of flights of fancy. And does that sound right to you? Do you feel, when you're working?
It does. I have to work on 2 things. I can't work on one thing. You get so intensely drawn into something. I think with the Lost Words, there came a point where all I was doing was that. And it was the most curious engagement with the book. You talked yourself about Rob turning up at the same time as the parcel that I sent you. When I was working on the Wren poem in the Lost Words, everywhere I went, there were wrens. And it's called frequency illusion, isn't it? Where, you just look, you find what you're looking for. And yet, there's an exhibition of the Lost Words, artwork and words, which is touring the UK. It's actually stuck in lockdown at the moment. And a woman wrote to Rob and myself and said, I'd never seen an otter before. And I went into the exhibition and I read the Otter poem 3 times. I read it aloud because there's something about the words that just love to be spoken. Otter enters a river without falter. What a supple slider out of holt and into water. And she said the next day I went for a walk and I saw 2 otters, and they were just almost exactly the same shape in how they were curved as the ones in the painting. That's not quite frequency illusion.
No, I mean, you're sort of summoning these things up, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
And
it is great. One of our reviews on can I mention Amazon?
Sure.
Yeah. One of our reviews on Amazon actually it accuses us of witchcraft and actually being responsible for the wildfires because weasel whirls through world like wildfire, and we shouldn't be encouraging children to say spells, and it's our fault. So we're not that powerful.
If you were, I think you would be trying to put spells on other better things, right?
Possibly, yes. Possibly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, like, what was the origin of the Lost Words and the Lost Spells of these projects? I know so many of us know the story now these words that were going to be excised from. It was a children's dictionary, I believe.
Yeah, it's a children's dictionary that was used very frequently in schools, and I was asked to sign a letter by Lawrence Rose, who's a poet, just requesting that the editorial decision was changed and the words were put back in the dictionary. And you know, we work in the world of words, and words are important. And the idea of a generation growing up, you know, not just writers, not just artists, but you've got kids who are going to be planning developers and architects and all kinds of things. And yet bluebell wouldn't be a word that was in their dictionary. So it's a thing, it's just not important. So when it comes to developing a wood, turn it into houses, there's bluebells there. They're of no consequence. So it seemed to us that it was important that these natural words were included, celebrated, known. And I wrote to Robert and I said, I've been thinking about this. I didn't know him at the time, actually. So this email came out of the blue for him. I've been thinking about doing a book which is just some of the refused words and just a dictionary definition. And might you write an introduction for it? Would you be interested in that? And he said, thank you very much, Miss Morris, for your email. I do like your work very much, but I'm terribly busy at the moment. terribly busy at the moment. And then a couple of weeks later, he got back to me and said, yeah, I've been thinking about this and I wonder if we could do something more. And then through emails, because he lives in Cambridge, which is the other side of Wales and the other side of England. So through emails, knocking backwards and forwards ideas, that's where the idea grew for the book. And Hamish Hamilton just understood straight away. They understood the whole project. It's amazing to have a publisher where you go in with this crazy idea about absence and presence and magicking things back, and we want it to be really big, and can we use gold leaf? And they just go yes to everything, and then they take the care to see how the gold sits on the paper so they get the best production values. And it's, you know, it's a team. It's mine and Rob's name that are on the book, but it's a team. And the designer Alison O'Toole came up with that beautiful typeface, which is the alphabet scattered through the book. She is astonishing. She's also the designer for the Lost Spells and the Unwinding, and she did the cover for House Without Windows with me. And also, you may guess from the shuffling here, I've got piles of books beside me. She did the cover for this, which is Book of Nursery Rhymes. Her design is just astonishing. She's amazing. It's a real game changer when you have somebody so brilliant. So it's a team, you know. And then when we go back and we're part way through doing the bird book, but we say, we were thinking about doing some more spells, and it's going to get in the way of the bird book, because although the Lost Spells is really tiny, it's got the sharpest elbows. So it just shoved the bird book out of the way. And there are birds in it. There's barn owl. Oh, strange things falling out there. And who else? Jackdaw. Rob loves doing the jackdaw spell. It's a real tongue twister. I'm sure he wrote it thinking that nobody could learn it, but it's going in. It's jackdaw.
And are there? I don't remember now. Are there herons in the Lost Spells?
There's no. Are there what? Sorry, hares or herons?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, you have an egret. Okay.
There's an egret. Yeah. There's peregrine, but that's not. He actually wrote peregrine, but he it's not in the book.
And so we should clarify to everyone watching that Jackie and Rob are currently working on a at least third collaboration for Bird, which I'm excited about. But I want to go back for a second. You mentioned sort of the team effort to get the book out there, and as a bookseller, I always think that team effort and that collaboration continues with readers, because so much of the story of the Lost Words are these crowdfunding campaigns to get the book into every school and to get people. And so much of that to me feels like there was something about that book and these collaborations that really kind of speak to the moment. And how do you how does that feel to you? You create this thing with a group of people, you and Rob working, collaborating together, and then it gets out there and it kind of becomes this phenomenon. And what kind of ripple effects does that have on your creativity and your life and things?
It's hard to find the words, actually. It's astonishing. What I love is seeing the work that children do, inspired by it, hearing the stories from teachers, hearing, because I hated school. I really didn't like it, but it's drawn school outside. So it's been like a portal of escape that you jump through and then you're outside. So kids have been going into outside classrooms, and there's outside Lost Words classrooms now. And the absolutely astonishing writing that children have done, inspired by the book, and paintings. When I was learning to draw, I would look at Charles Tunnicliffe's bird paintings and I would copy them. And there's all these kids that are they start off, they're kind of copying what I've done, and then they take it much further, and it's just beautiful. It's lovely to see. The crowdfunding campaigns are something else. I mean, that's just an astonishing thing when people decide to do something like that. And it's a real privilege that they think your book is worthy of something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
My wife works for a nonprofit tutoring and literacy organization in San Francisco, and they work in sort of underserved, under-resourced schools. And she used some of this idea as a prompt for one of the classes that they taught. And and some of these kids grow up in San Francisco, a peninsula surrounded by water, and have never seen the bay, or the ocean.
Yeah.
And so for them, this becomes a portal not only to these words that they would have any sense they're endangered, but that were never even a part of their vocabulary.
Yeah.
And so for that,
I mean, one of the things that really frustrated me at the start was the very first thing that we did with television. The film crew went into a school to ask children whether they knew the words. And I was saying, don't go into a school, go into a factory. Don't go into an office, ask grown-ups. I went into schools where the teacher said, I didn't know what my 3 words were. One was starling, one was weasel, and one was wren, and I didn't know what they were. And this is the problem. If it's a whole generation before as well who don't know, because a bird is a bird.
Right.
So if you don't know, the first class I went into to do work with the Lost Words, the bookseller I was with said, can you just ask the children who knows what a wren is? And not one in a class of 32 put their hand up, which means maybe they never heard that song, seen that little bird that threads through the city hedges, just not noticed it. It's like you don't see trees, you don't know the names of them. It's real poverty, that is, I think. And it's not the children's fault, but more children know them now.
Yeah, and this goes back to this idea of the frequency illusion. I mean, we can become startled and more curious about the world if we know even just a little bit about a wren.
Yeah.
You see a picture of a wren, or if you see one of your paintings of a heron or a bear, suddenly that opens all these doors and the world becomes a more kind of enchanted place.
And dragons. I do love dragons as well.
Yeah. Well, and
but
No, go ahead.
But I don't only paint, I also write for other people. So this is one of the books that came out this year, Mrs. Noah's Garden, and this is actually illustrated by James Mayhew. Mrs. Noah is a character that I very much like. She's slightly subversive. She had a coat with very big pockets. And Noah himself wasn't very keen on, this is the previous one. He wasn't very keen on dragons and troublesome creatures, as he called them. So he wasn't giving them any room on the ark. This is my favorite page, my favorite piece of writing that I've done. 2 words, it rained.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think I know his work, his illustration.
James is wonderful, and this was a completely new departure for him. So it's got little bits of his things in here. But Mrs. Noah has a sewing machine, and she likes to stitch. And she's her own woman, really. And then there's also this one, which is The Secret of the Tattered Shoes, and this was illustrated by Ihsan Abdullahi, who is an Iranian illustrator. This has just come out in America, I think. It's published by Tiny Owl, and this is just beautiful. This is where I get to do the writing and somebody else gets to do what I call the hard work.
Well, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, how was it for you then, collaborating as a writer, collaborating and an artist, collaborating with another artist? Do you just sort of sit back and let it unfold because you know you've been on the other side of that, or?
Yes, with the if I'm illustrating, if I'm writing for another illustrator, I try to leave them the space in the text. There's a new one that I've just done for Mrs. Noah, which is Mrs. Noah's Song. And I got the first line for it about 1.5 years ago, which is Mrs. Noah sings as Mrs. Noah sings as she sows, and she sows seeds and she sows clothes. And then it took a while to catch the rest of it. And I did say to James, in the pictures, Mr. Noah's making something. And that's very important because it's all in the pictures, that part of the story. Mm-hmm. So I just said, he's making something. It's a musical instrument. Everything else is up to you, but he has to be making it. So that's as much as I would do. Although I did say to him that Mr. Noah had a tractor and it was a Ferguson tractor. And he said, do you want to illustrate this book yourself? But you can't, I mean, with Ihsan, he came up with these beautiful puppet women. At the end of the book, I said to him, it's up to you what happens. And it happens in the plot spoiler, happens on the end papers. So I said that part is up to you. I love his work, and I love Tiny Owl's books. They're struggling at the moment because they're a very small press, and it's really hard when you're small to print enough quantity to get your prices down, so the profit is less, and also you don't get access to the reviews, and that's a
kind of across the spectrum in a lot of ways for that whole book industry, I think, is.
Yeah.
And and the larger you get, the more easily imprints in your can get lost in these things, and who's paying for it. But I want to take a quick second here to let everybody in the audience know that there is an ask a question function below. So if you have any craft questions, or there's anything you want to ask Jackie that I'm not covering, feel free to jump in. And there are a couple here. Maybe we'll. Elizabeth asks if lost words and lost spells are appropriate for a 4-year-old, and I'll let you answer. I'll answer to say that we have a 22-month-old who is obsessed with these books and and knows these animals already.
always say, I don't know whether they do the same in America, but in the UK they put age-specific numbers on books, and the Lost Words is from 0 to dead, but you can read to fetuses. I used to do it with my children because they can hear the vibrations and they feel your mood as well. And I have read it to my friend who had died, and she wasn't going to get away that easily. So one of the things that the Lost Words has done in the UK is it's been very somehow it's spoken to people with dementia. I don't know why, but it seems to have done some very odd things, including there was one lady who said she bought a copy for her dad. She'd come over from Australia to see him, and he was 94, and they thought he'd reached that stage of dementia where he had lost his language. But as he was flicking through the book, which was a bit of a miracle in the first place, he started to speak, and he got to the bramble page, and he started to tell them how blackbirds were like the harbingers of spring, and it was just astonishing.
Wow.
That's a strange kind of magic, and I don't know whether it is that just that rhythm of language, or maybe the paintings remind people of books that they used to have. I don't know, but that's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, I think there's some alchemy to a book like that. That is, I'm sure science could explain why, and maybe there's some memory things that happen with people with dementia that harkens back to their youth. But I also feel like there's some magic in it that can't be explained away, or at least I want to believe that.
There is a music in Rob's language. I think there's everything that he's written for me. When he first started writing, I said to him, you've got to speak it aloud, because that's how we share picture books. So if you speak it aloud, if it works. And then he started getting really specific. So when he sent me the Moth spell, he said, right, I've sent you the Moth spell. I don't want you to look at it. Just print it off. And I want you to go out at twilight. And so this was really specific. So you have to have enough light to read by, but be at that time when the moths are coming out. And curlew, he said, take it down the beach. Go out to the headlands where the curlews are and read it into that space. And yeah.
That sounds like well, I mean, as far as demanding collaborations go, that doesn't sound like the way.
No, it's good. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple other questions here. Catherine says she would love to hear from you about your preferred drawing and painting materials, and anything else about your techniques that you might be willing to share.
Well, I like watercolor, and I tend to leave my watercolor in my palettes. I love ceramic palettes. They're very nice. I use mostly a Winsor, Winsor & Newton No. 4 sable brush. It has a very fine tip on it. And I use Winsor & Newton artist quality watercolors mostly. But I do like painting in Sumi ink as well. And this House Without Windows is all done using Sumi ink, which I grind myself. Just trying to find a good one to show you. Oh, this has got feathers in as well. All got feathers in. So can you see that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this book? Can we take a digression after you talk a little more about your technique? Because I want to talk about this book, which you also sent me a copy of.
Mm-hmm. This one's got gold leaf labyrinths in as well. Yeah. I love painting on Two Rivers watercolor paper, which is really toothsome and it really snags the brush. But yeah, mostly watercolor. Lost Words and Lost Spells is all watercolor. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, you tell me.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So this book is available in the UK, but not here for copyright issues, which maybe we can't get into. I don't know, but can you talk about a little bit about how you discovered the book, and did you help usher this back into print?
I did, and this is an odd one. There was a book that was published by a young woman who was about 14, a blogger called Zuala. I don't know whether that happened in America as well, or whether she was British, and it was published by Penguin, I think. And I remember having a conversation on social media. It was quite a while ago, but people were getting quite vicious about the advance that she got, because she wasn't a writer and it was her first book. And I do remember saying, you know, can we just remember that this is a child, and she might be reading this. But then I also said, I think there's a thing with writers. The older they get, sometimes the better they get. So I was saying, I can't imagine something that is written by a 14-year-old would interest me. And somebody said, have you read The House Without Windows by Barbara Newhall Follett? She was 12 when she wrote it. I think you'd love it. And I looked online and I read you can get it online. And it was, I read the first 2 paragraphs and thought, I want to read this in a book. So I looked it up, and the first one I found was £750. And I thought, I don't want to read it that much. And the next one I found was 145, and it was in Oxfam. And I thought, well, I just sold a painting, so this is going to be like donating a large amount of money to Oxfam. That's a good thing, and I'll get a book, and hopefully it'll be good. And it's beautiful. She wrote, it's like nature writing by somebody who hasn't been told how to do it. It's writing from the heart. It's a curious kind of dream journey of a child who runs away from home because she doesn't want to be in 4 walls, and she lives wild in the meadow, and then by the sea, and then in the mountains. And eventually she reaches out her hands and butterflies land on them, and she kind of dissolves, and she just sort of read you the last little bit. And when the sun tinged the sky with colour, a flock of these butterflies of purple and gold and green came swooping and alighted on her head in a circle, the largest in front. Others came in myriads and covered her dress with delicate wing touches. Ipazip held out her arms a moment. A gold and black one alighted on each wrist, and then she rose into the air and, hovering an instant over a great laurel bush, vanished. She was a fairy, a wood nymph. She would be invisible forever to all mortals, save those few who had minds to believe, eyes to see. To these she's ever present, the spirit of nature, a sprite of the meadow, a naiad of the lakes, a nymph of the woods. And the strange and haunting thing, she wrote 3 books. When she was 24, 25, she was walking home from work and she disappeared and she was never seen again. And there are stories there. I'm surprised nobody's raised the story about how many women disappear. Somebody has tried to find her and has found a body that could be her, could be somebody else. He thinks it probably isn't either of them, and that's 3 missing women.
Yeah.
So nobody knows what happened to her. Yeah.
It's a beautiful book, and I have you to thank for bringing it to my attention and then actually sending me a copy of it, since I couldn't get a copy here. But now I feel like it's my job is to like push all of my publishing friends into bringing this back, despite all the obstacles.
It has to wait a small time. If it just waits just a few years, because although her publisher didn't go looking for her either, which I think is neglect, possibly, they still own the copyright for another few years.
And then it'll be in public domain.
Quite a difficult thing, really. So, yeah, it would be lovely to bring it back out with an illustrated version. It sold beautifully well when it first came out, and they did promise her an illustrated version. And it's actually been nominated for the Greenaway in the UK, which is lovely. So I hope she might have liked that. But that was a curious collaboration of ghosts, really, because she really haunted me. And when I sent it to one publisher, and they said, this is your writing, isn't it? And you made up this backstory. And I thought, oh my God, how I wish I was that clever that I had done that. And then I thought, hang on, she thinks I write like a 12-year-old. So you're like, whoa. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, there's a couple other questions here that we have, and I encourage anyone else to. You happy if we keep going? We're at 50. Somehow we've been talking for 56 minutes, and
I'm fine. I can talk the hind leg off a donkey, really.
Marianne asks if you can maybe name some of your influences, your artistic influences. And she writes a great sweep of painters over time and place, and she thinks specifically of frescoes, Renaissance painters, and perhaps others.
I did love. One of the few things I loved at school was discovering the Renaissance and fresco painting. And I have now just discovered a thing called clayboard, which you can paint on with watercolor. And it's very like, shouldn't show you this because this is from the new Book of Birds. I'm not really allowed to show. So that's a lapwing. But I did 2 lapwings because I did that one first, but I didn't like that one. Thought that was wrong, so I did it again. So I did that one, and it's a strange surface. It's very smooth, but it's almost like fresco. And you can do all kinds of. You can rub into it and scratch into it, and it doesn't smell like paper there. I like the smell of paper. So Renaissance painters, very much. Frescoes, a lot of gold, Japanese art, that kind of space that you have in the big screens with all the blocks of gold leaf. So I think that's where my gold is like a crossover between icon painting and Japanese and Chinese screens. And I love Tunacliff. I love natural history painting when I was young. Now, illustrators that I just adore now are people like Sydney Smith, who did footpath flowers, pavement flowers, I think it is in America. Sean Tan, who is just absolutely gorgeous. He won the Greenaway last year with, can't remember the name of the book now, but it's fantastic.
Was it The Arrival? Was it?
No, it wasn't The Arrival. It was the.
There was the one that
Tales from the Inner City.
Yeah.
Really stunning, absolutely stunning. And I love Isan's work. It was a real pleasure to work with him. Very strange. I also love this woman's work. This is Kathy Fisher. Nicola Davis wrote this book. This is really strange. The start of my year, when I was finishing The Lost Spouse, I was not in my house. I was in Evesham with my mum because my dad was in hospital. And I have lots of animals. And Kathy was here in my house looking after my animals, painting. And my father died. He died very peacefully and faced his death with open arms and very bravely. And then we came back here, and Kathy lives in Australia, and she's stuck in my house. So her studio is the other part of my roof, and she painted this book while she was here, and it's just stunning. It was just fantastic for me to see somebody else working away, seeing, sometimes you just sit there all day thinking about paintings. Just wonderful, and how to make it work. And I love this.
Well, that's incredible. I don't know if that's out here. I'll have to look for that.
Yeah. She's done 3 with Nicola. She's done The Pond and Perfect, and this one. And actually there's others as well. They're all published by Graphic, small independent publisher in Wales. But I just love her figure drawing. I think she's so much better at figures than me. Just find another one. This is Friends.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a good one. I like that. And I've got a story because stuck in lockdown. She doesn't actually live in my house. She just uses it as a studio. But I have a story called The Panda's Child, which Kathy's going to illustrate, and we just need to find ourselves a publisher. So that's going to be amazing. Although I think illustrating it in my house might be hard work for her.
It's one thing to give a little bit longer leash, but under your roof.
Yeah, I have said she's not allowed to leave until she's done it, and she's painted the most beautiful panda. I'll take a photo of it later and stick it on my Instagram. It's just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Someone asked about the leaping hair behind you on your ceiling. Kind of behind you, there's a light. The light behind you.
There.
Yeah. If there's any special significance to that.
No, it's made of wood. I can't remember whether somebody gave me that. It's very kind. I've got so many weird things stuck to my ceiling, including a picture of me when I was very young. Can you see that one? Very young.
Wow. Where are you?
Lyme Regis. Thinking about getting a dog. That's what I was doing then. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, your father passing away at the beginning of the year while you were finishing the book, and I sort of imagine now, when you think back to that you can hold up this book that was in some ways, almost a consequence of that happening, right? Your friend comes and stays and finishes this book that I think a lot of us are dealing. Just this morning, my wife's found out that her best friend's father died of COVID back east, and her friend had gone. And as we all sort of work our way through grief, and I wonder for you, beyond this other book that came about because someone was staying in your home watching your animals.
Yeah.
How do you, how do you just get up and do the work?
I don't know. With lost spells, Dad went into hospital. I had 3 double-page spreads to do before I travelled up to my mum. This is one of them. But then while I was at mum's, I was driving her up and down to the hospital to see Dad, and it was dreadful. British hospitals are struggling. He was not in a good place. And all of these tiny pictures were my escape while my dad was dying. And then he died, and I still had to do the cover. And that was a very, very hard thing to do. It hurt. It physically hurt my head trying to settle myself down and paint this picture. And one of the things that I was thinking of was that the owls are a messenger between worlds, and sometimes they carry the souls of their dead. I did it. Sometimes you don't hit it first time, but I did it, and my mum walked in later the day and had a look, and she just looked at it and she said, "Oh, your dad would have liked that." And then you kind of carry all that and all those memories of it with you. He was buried the day lockdown started. That was difficult. But I hadn't actually realised, I guess, because, you know, to get to 59 years old and for this to be your first significant loss, that's quite good going, really, isn't it? I hadn't realised how much life continues around death. And I understand that poem now, Stop All the Clocks.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that you kind of go into shock and you have to stop and just think about it. And but it's kind of woven through of all the books it could be woven into. The Lost Spells, which sings of loss, I guess, love and loss. That would be the one, really.
Yeah. And those things are so intertwined. And I mean, what's the expression about grief just being a form of love, you know?
Yeah. I mean I've just been back to my mum's, and it was hard. It was hard leaving her on her own there. They were married for 65 years. And no matter how many people tell you, you know, you shouldn't have regrets, you have them.
Yeah.
You're human. You have them. And that's how it is. But moving forward, it's an interesting time that we're living through. And a lot of people have it a lot worse than me. I'm so lucky.
But yeah,
Shall we talk about paint again now?
Yeah, we'll bring back. Someone asked, "How large is your paper when you paint?" Which you showed us the new size. So does it vary?
Yeah, I mean usually with the book, with this one, all of these pieces are the same size as the book. With the Lost Words, they were as well, and Birds is bigger. Or usually when I work at least half up to the size of the book. And yeah, I guess just looking for other ones. Same size or slightly larger is good, really. And it's, you know, when I'm painting, just painting, because the Unwinding came out of the spaces in between doing illustrations. It was my unwinding, because you get tense when you're doing a book and you kind of get really wound up and it's really, really hard. And it was my breathing out, really. So that became strange when that became a book. And now my unwinding is this one. This is my manuscript for my new book. And I can just can I stand up to do this, I think. I'm working with gold leaf and
Wow.
typewriters. And it's all quite odd.
Oh, amazing.
And it's unusual to have a manuscript. It's going to be a very interesting editing job. And it's kind of words as images. There are also bits of bark and writing on. I do love a joke. And but I think I have a strange sense of humor. So if I can just move my cup of tea back to the gold leaf. I do love working with gold leaf, you see. And that's my idea of a joke.
Well, maybe you have one piece of pandemic writing. I feel like can we just do this once a week? What do you think? Maybe once a month we'll just get together and chat.
Yeah. Because what I haven't done is gone through stuff like, look, this is one of my favorite books, Adlands by Tom Bullough. Do you know that one?
No.
Brilliant. Tom Bullough is an amazing writer. Lives in Wales. He wrote a book called The Clawed Glass. I think that was his first one.
Was that a novel?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And this is a novel. It's set in Wales. It's absolutely fantastic. Favorite book. I had such a book hangover after this one. This is special edition version. Hang on. Let me see if I can even get it out of its case. This is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern.
Oh, wow. What an edition.
I know, this is the very special edition that Kathy bought me for my birthday. And it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And it's signed and it's got lovely end papers. They only did hang on, 100 copies.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? And it's got a ribbon. And it's got a box. And it's got a slipcase. So that's quite nice. And then this one is amazing. It's published by Milkweed.
Yeah.
Who are American. Favorite poet, Mary Oliver. She's always around somewhere, but also now Barbara Kinsolver.
Just out.
Just out, but listen to this. Listen to that. I'm not going to let you go. You're going to have to cut me off. This is called Love Poem with Birds. They are your other flame. Your world begins and ends with the dawn chorus, a plaint of saw-whet owl, and in between the 7 different neotropical warblers you will see on your walk to the mailbox. It takes a while. I know now not to worry. Once I resented your wandering eye that flew away mid-sentence, chasing any raft of swallows. I knew as we sat on the porch, unwinding the cares of our days, you were listening to me through a fine mesh of oriole, towhee, flycatcher. I said it was like kissing through a screen door. You're not all here. But who could be more present than a man with the patience of sycamores, showing me the hummingbird's nest you've spied so high in a tree, my mortal eye can barely make out the lichen-dabbed knot on an elbow of branch. You will know the day her nestlings leave it. The wonder is that such an eye that lets not even the smallest sparrow fall from notice beholds me also, that I might walk the currents of our days with red and gold feathers in my hair, my plain tongue laced with music, that we, the birds and I, may be text and illumination in your book of common prayer.
Wow.
She's a good one, isn't she?
Yeah. Well, maybe you can, you mentioned this, your one piece of pandemic writing that's been published so far, and you wanted to read from this, which this is another book this
is a book of hopes, and it was edited by Catherine Rundell, who's pretty big in the UK. I don't know how she is in the US. And the proceeds support NHS charities. So she just asked us to do a piece about hope, and there was no other prescription to anything, length or anything. This is going to seem like I've been really clever because this really chimes with that poem, but I only read that poem about 5 minutes before we started talking. So I didn't plan this, okay?
This is all frequency illusion magic.
Yeah. And there's a lot of birds in this. So this is called Hope, or Learning the Language of Birds. In years to come, you would think of this time as the time of great quiet. It would seem to you then that the earth was holding her breath, waiting, watching. Cars silent in the streets, planes absent from the skies. After a week, the air would seem cleaner, colours brighter. But the night seemed darker, perhaps because the stars glowed brighter. Fear wandered the dreams of some, anxiety stalked. And you would wake in early morning as the lights slipped into each day and listen. You would hear the sweet notes rising with the sun to greet the light. You would hear across the silence a response. You would listen as other voices lifted to song. You would begin to learn each different voice, begin to see them. And soon they were no longer just birds, but became wren, robin, blackbird, thrush, greenfinch, goldfinch, sparrow, jay, and you would follow the textures of birdsong, call and response as it moved with the sun, and you would feel for the first time how the sun was lifted up into the sky each day on birdsong. You would feel the turning of the earth beneath your feet as the song travelled with the path of the light. You would hear the turning of the world as each day dawns at the edge of the darkness, at the edge of the light. You would know that others were listening as the song moved with the light. You would learn that if, for a while, it seemed the earth stood still, holding her breath, if it seemed that the nights were darker, somewhere on the turning world the sun was rising, the birds were singing, a wave of song in an ocean of sky, and you would know that others too would hear those voices. Out of the silence, just before dawn, you would find the threads of hope as the breath of birds became song.
Wow. This is and so who published this? Someone asked if we could get it in the US, and I don't think it's available here yet.
Bloomsbury, I think. Hang on.
I'm sorry.
Bloomsbury, I think. Yeah, Bloomsbury Children's Books.
Okay.
And it's got Michael Mulpergo and Frank Cottrell Boyce and Axel Scheffler and Lauren Child, A.F. Harold, Jacqueline Wilson, Michelle Magorian, Philip Arder, Chris Riddell.
Great lineup. Well,
it's Mark Haddon.
Yeah, Laura asked that, and I would say we'll look into it. And if not, Blackwell's is a great place to order from that is not owned by Amazon. If you wanted to order from the UK, they do free shipping, which is, I don't know how they actually make any money.
No, I don't know, but they're wonderful, aren't they?
They're great, yeah. And I recommend that
they've got a ghost of a bear in their cellar, which is, not every bookshop's got that.
Well, Jackie, I want to thank you for this. This has been, I feel it's been a long time coming, and I was serious. I think we should let's make a series of this.
Yeah, just give me a couple of months to read something else, and then I can read your poetry. Or maybe I should just read you other people's poetry just for an hour.
It's funny because we've been talking, I've been reading Rachel Elson's poems. Do you know her work? Do you have a copy? Well, before this morning, after we dropped our little guy off to daycare, I picked this up, and the first poem that I came across was Moth, which obviously feels in tune with your work. I don't want to be the one who has the last say during this, though.
No, I do, because it's really strange. I have that book, and I had some willow leaves in it that I was writing on earlier.
Yeah. She was amazing, and obviously gone too soon. But this is very short. This is called Moth. You cannot say you did not know those singed nights, spinning in the dust, one wing is gone, and half your 6 legs spent. But oh, that flame, how it held you so sweet in the palm of its light. And I thought of that as I picked up your book this morning to kind of prepare for this. So it feels everything kind of comes together in these ways. So thank you again. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and I look forward to, more continued collaborations and between you and Rob and all of your work. And it's been a real pleasure to work and get my way into your house here. This is amazing. I feel so fortunate.
What I was going to say was, if we do it again, I'll do it downstairs because all the cats will come as well, so we can have a cat off.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll pick apart. Yeah. And thank you to everyone who took time out of their day to do this. I really found these things to be such a sustaining, invigorating part of my new routine. We're unable to see as many people, obviously, and not in ways that we're familiar with. So having this kind of opportunity feels special. And I thank you all for joining us. And thank you again, Jackie. Good night to you. I'm going to go have some lunch.
Oh, I think I might drink rum by the fire and read.
Okay, that's better than the peanut butter sandwich I'm going to make myself.
Okay.
Thank you all again. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.